While J.R.R. Tolkien and George R.R. Martin have many disagreements about fantasy, they have one thing in common. They were both disappointed by Gandalf's resurrection. Tolkien wrote, quote, "I think the way in which Gandalf's return is presented is a defect, and one I was aware of and probably did not work hard enough to mend." Martin agrees, saying,
I remember when I was 12, 13 years old and reading Fellowship of the Ring, and Gandalf goes down into that pit with the Balrog and fly, you fools, and God, the power of that scene. And Gandalf was dead. He was like the daddy. He was the one who knew everything, but then he brought him back.
Okay.
But I would have left him dead.
Martin is no stranger to occasionally criticizing the book that inspired Game of Thrones, but it's odd to see Tolkien also admit to this flaw, given how carefully he constructed The Lord of the Rings.
And that is partly out of the fact that I'm a meticulous sort of bloke.
But to Tolkien, the defect wasn't that Gandalf returns, it's how he returns. Tolkien was frustrated with what he called the ever-present compulsions of narrative technique. Tolkien knew that Gandalf needed to explain where he'd been for hundreds of pages, but was annoyed at how that explanation would hold up the urgent narrative. Tolkien did his best, but admits that the momentum is a little impeded even so. Though I have severely cut G's account of himself. Tolkien's self-criticism is actually very different from Martin's belief that Gandalf should have either stayed dead or returned with a more drastically changed characterization.
Had a different cloak on, white instead of gray, okay.
This disagreement inspired Martin's own philosophy of resurrecting characters. In A Song of Ice and Fire, death is a deeply transformative experience. Almost as an answer to the minimal differences between the Gandalfs, Martin's character Lady Stoneheart bears almost no resemblance to Catelyn Stark, whose zombified corpse she inhabits. Where Catelyn was beautiful in life, quote, "Stoneheart's flesh had gone pudding soft in the water and turned the color of curdled milk. Half her hair was gone and the rest had turned as white and brittle as a crone's. Her face was shredded skin and black blood, but her eyes were the most terrible thing." Internally, Stoneheart is a twisted continuation of Catelyn's psyche, possessing enough memories to seek revenge for the Red Wedding, but lacking her humanity. The protectiveness Cat felt for her children during life is corrupted into Stoneheart's obsession to kill everyone involved in her son's death. Lady Stoneheart is a clear, scary representation of Martin's belief that
I do think that if a character has gone through death, that's a transformative experience. My characters who come back from death are the worse for wear. In some ways, they're not even the same characters anymore.
maybe this is the answer to Tolkien and Martin's different approaches toward resurrection. Martin requires immense change and Tolkien doesn't. But this isn't true. As if from beyond the grave, Tolkien himself responds to Martin's criticism that Gandalf's resurrection is a sort of cheat, saying one critic curiously used the same expression, cheating, but Gandalf really died and was changed. For that seems to me the only real cheating, to represent anything that can be called death as making no difference. But if this is true, then how does Gandalf the White meaningfully change from Gandalf the Grey? According to Tolkien, Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted, enhanced, and returned. Both his wisdom and power are much greater. When he speaks, he commands attention. The old Gandalf could not have dealt so with Theoden, nor with Saruman.
Saruman, your staff is broken.
Gandalf's changes have less to do with his personality than with his nature. Unlike Martin's human characters resurrected by divine forces, Gandalf is a divine being shackled inside the body of a human. Tolkien says that the wizards, quote, appeared as old sage figures, precisely to limit and hinder their power on the physical plane, so that they should do what they were primarily sent for. Train, advise, instruct, arouse the hearts and minds of those threatened by Sauron to a resistance with their own strengths, and not just to do the job for them. This means that when Gandalf is resurrected, more of his latent power is made available to him. Tolkien uses the word enhanced 3 separate times to describe Gandalf the White, and this word cuts to the heart of his difference with Martin. In A Song of Ice and Fire, death and resurrection is not a process of enhancement, but rather loss. In Martin's own words,
He comes back as Gandalf the White, and if anything, he's like sort of improved. My characters who come back from death are the worse for wear. They've lost something.
This difference between loss and enhancement isn't just philosophical. It's consistent with the story's different cosmologies. In both The Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, resurrections reflect the power of the Resurrector. In Middle-earth, people are sent back through the intervention of the one god himself, Eru Ilúvatar, who is defined by goodness and moral perfection. And so accordingly, Gandalf is upgraded. The elf Glorfindel, who died killing a Balrog during the First Age, is sent back to Middle-earth with a spiritual power greatly enhanced by his self-sacrifice. Tolkien's characters are enhanced because they have proven to be in alignment with their benevolent creator. Similarly but differently, in A Song of Ice and Fire, the loss involved in resurrections reflects the story's own cosmological background. First of all, the gods in Game of Thrones might not actually even exist.
How real are the gods?
How real are the gods in our world? Are those things real or are those things myths? I like that sort of ambiguity. Since it occurs in real life, I want to create that ambiguity in my fiction too.
If the gods do exist, they're deeply suspicious. There are many gods with competing goals, requiring their followers to perform horrible deeds like mass slaughter and human sacrifice. In contrast to the divine grace that restores life in Lord of the Rings, resurrections in Game of Thrones are transactional and not always fair. The witch Mirri Maz Duur tells Daenerys that only death can pay for life. And while Mirri makes good on her promise to keep Khal Drogo from death, she doesn't exactly keep him alive either, restoring the Khal to a sad vegetative state that Dany herself ends out of mercy. Even worse, Mirri tricks Dany into sacrificing her unborn child. Left without her husband and son, Dany learns that the loss of resurrections can affect both the living and the dead. Lady Stoneheart loses her ability to speak. Beric loses his memories. The Whites seem to lose everything about their former selves as well as their own agency. But what about Jon Snow? In the show, he returns from death with little more than a haircut and a sexy scar. The key word there is the show. As of the most recent book, Jon Snow is still dead, bleeding out on the wall since 2011. We don't know how Jon will return, but it's safe to say it'll be more complicated than in the TV show. It's widely believed by fans that before Jon is resurrected, he'll warg into the body of his direwolf, Ghost. Jon's last word before death is Ghost, and Melisandre sees a vision of Jon becoming a man, now a wolf, now a man again. When Jon is returned to his body, we can expect a transformation typical of a Martin resurrection. The books tell us that when a man dies and wargs inside a beast, every day his memory fades, and every day he becomes a little more a wolf until nothing of the man is left and only the beast remains. Meaning, the longer Jon spends inside Ghost, the more dehumanized he'll become. And the more his resurrection will be like a wolf in human form. There are theories that Jon's eyes will turn red like Ghost's, and his hair will turn white like Lady Stoneheart's. Both of these reflecting the haunted wolf Targaryen Jon would become. And since Jon will merge with Ghost, it's unclear whether there will be enough of the direwolf left over to live independently. Jon's probable resurrector, Melisandre, uses the same phrase as Mirri Maz Duur. Only death can pay for life.
A great gift requires a great sacrifice.
The gift of Jon's resurrection might require the sacrifice of Ghost's life. In the TV show, Jon isn't pleased with being brought back to life.
I shouldn't be here.
This frustration, combined with grief from losing his closest companion and anger from being turned into a non-consensually undead wolfman, might provide the kind of transformative change that Martin requires from death and resurrection. This all sounds very anti-Tolkien, but it's actually not. Given Tolkien's belief in the importance of consistent world building, he'd probably agree that resurrections performed by eldritch horror gods should be dehumanizing and awful. It's actually how Tolkien himself depicts resurrections performed outside the will of Eru Ilúvatar. The Nazgûl, wicked kings of men resurrected by Sauron, are similar to the Whites resurrected by the White Walkers. Both are defined by a profound loss of their individual natures as they're dominated by the wills of their master. Loss even extends to Sauron himself, who despite being immortal has his physical form destroyed and then resurrected twice, each time resulting in a loss of his own power. After Sauron's first death in Númenor, he's forbidden from ever again taking a fair form, instead presenting a grotesque appearance similar to the resurrected humans in Game of Thrones. And after the ring is cut from his finger, Sauron Sauron doesn't turn into an eyeball on top of a tower like in the movies, but rather into an even more reduced form of a man more than human stature but not gigantic, seemingly incapable of healing himself since he has only 4 fingers on his black hand. So much is made of Lord of the Rings versus Game of Thrones, but their authors' differences are often a matter of degrees rather than wholesale disagreement. They both agree that death and resurrection requires change. Martin probably doesn't feel that Gandalf the White changed enough, and Tolkien probably wouldn't be interested in a world governed by Cthulhus who may not even exist. The two authors have a complicated relationship of nested agreements inside disagreements. If you're interested in seeing more, click here. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing.